Hey, what's up world? It's your boy Corey Lanier, man. Today I want to talk to you guys about why I upgraded from the Lumix G7 to the Lumix S5, which is the camera I'm recording this vlog on, and just talk about some key differences, and maybe me talking about why I upgraded and how I did it will help you make a decision on if you want to get a camera and upgrade as well. Okay guys, so if you guys don't know that much about me, my name is Corey Lanier. I talk about the Lumix G7 a lot because I do love this camera, but recently it just so happens that I upgraded to the Lumix S5. I've also been using that camera a lot as well, and I kind of just want to talk about some of the key differences about why I upgraded from using the Lumix G7 to the Lumix S5. Now don't get it twisted, I'm definitely still gonna make Lumix G7 videos because I just love this camera. It's really unique for the time that it came out. It was really ahead of its time as a camera. It's really lightweight. I don't get tired when I use it. And also just for the sake of being able to use one of my favorite cameras, I'm definitely probably gonna use this one. So first let's talk about the sensor size on this camera versus that camera. On the Lumix G7, you have a 4x3 sensor size, which means that the sensor inside this camera, you guys can see, is about that size. Which is only about half the size of a full frame sensor. So, which means that when you're in a low light situation, you're only gonna have about half the amount of light information that's coming into your camera to be able to work with when you're on a camera like this. Now that doesn't necessarily have to be a super bad thing if you know how to kind of compensate for it. So if you know that you have half the amount of light that you can pick up, then you need to get lenses that are gonna be a lot wider that can help compensate for bringing as much light as possible. Also, that lets you know that whenever you use certain lenses, that whatever millimeter lens you're on, you need to double what that number right here is saying, because whatever number that this says, you need to double that, and that's how it actually looks on the camera whenever you're using this camera. For example, the kit lens on the Lumix G7 goes from 42 millimeters to 14 millimeters, which in actual reality, what you're getting is a 84 to 28 millimeter lens on this camera. And 28 millimeters is about kind of equivalent to what your iPhone sees the normal width. So just to give you an idea of what you can shoot with this camera. Now when it comes to the Lumix S5, you have a full frame camera. It's one of Lumix's first full frame series, the S series is their full frame series. And that means that whatever lens that you're using, you're gonna be getting much more light coming into your sensor, which means it's easier to shoot in low light. So which means the lenses that you get for this camera are the actual focal lengths whenever you use the lenses for the Lumix S5. Right now, I'm shooting and talking to you guys on the kit lens for the Lumix S5. I believe it goes from 20 millimeters to 60 millimeters. And right now I have it zoomed out as far as possible, which gives me a pretty wide angle to be able to talk to you guys and not feel like I'm all up in your face. You can definitely see how messy the room is that I'm in. I'm pretty sure Taj is gonna kill me for recording in here, by the way. Okay, so talking about the sensor size, when shooting with the Lumix G7 at nighttime, I have found that it has been a little difficult sometimes when I go past ISO of 1600. It does get a little grainy, and it does get a little grainy. I really wouldn't use this camera in the club settings that I've done different promo videos with. Now when it comes to the sensor size and low light also with the Lumix G7, I have shot a lot of club videos, recap videos and stuff, with this camera, and I've noticed that once I go past 1600 on the ISO, some of the video starts to become unusable because the ISO is too high up. But with the Lumix S5, I almost sometimes don't even need a light at all on the camera. I could just shoot with whatever light sources that I have from whatever environment I'm in. As long as it's not completely pitch black, I can just use the camera. So it just makes filmmaking and making content videos that much easier. Also, when it comes to taking pictures on the Lumix G7, I believe the Lumix G7 shoots at 16 megapixels, which is pretty decent as far as taking pictures, but the Lumix S5 shoots at 24 megapixels, which is a significant higher amount of megapixels to be able to work with when it comes to taking photos. Also, I've been reading that taking pictures on a full frame lens with the 24 megapixels is kind of a sweet spot for taking photos and being able to print them and blow them up to a decent size. With the Lumix G7, you can blow them up as well, but it won't be as crisp as being taken with a full frame camera at 24 megapixels. I also like the fact that with the Lumix S5, I can do 4K slow motion, which is something that I use my Blackmagic 4K camera for a lot as well. Pretty much every single time I pick up that camera, I'm shooting 4K 60 frames per second. This camera cannot do that. It can do 1080 at 60 frames per second, but it does 4K. I believe the highest The highest frame rate it goes is maybe 30 frames per second. So for those clients who want that buttery, smooth, dope 4K footage, I can't deliver it to them with this camera. I have to always pick up the Blackmagic. Also, the Lumix G7 shoots at an 8 bit rate, which means I don't get as much color science to work with when I'm color grading it as I would get with the S5, which can shoot up to, I believe, a 10 bit rate. I also heard that if you use an Atomos monitor with the Lumix S5, you can maybe even shoot at a higher bit rate than 10 bits. I believe maybe 12. So basically what I'm saying is the Lumix S5 is definitely an upgrade. It does everything that the Lumix G7 can do and then some. Now if I was to just simply compare shooting 1080 60 frames per second on this camera as well as shooting 1080 60 frames per second on the Lumix S5, which would probably be the fairest comparison, you would still notice little things like I have a wider field of vision when I'm using the Lumix S5 versus when I'm using the Lumix G7. And since I've been blogging a lot more often, I've been realizing that I've been just wanting a wider field of vision. That was one of the main reasons I was really starting to get into shooting with my DJI Pocket 2, is because it has like a 20mm equivalent lens, and when I'm walking around, it's like I can kind of show everybody what I'm doing. It's really interactive and it's easy for me to kind of show you my environment and not feel like it's kind of claustrophobic and I'm all in the camera. Now for everyone who's been following me on this channel because you guys discovered me talking about the Lumix G7, don't worry, I'm definitely still gonna be talking about this camera. I may not be using it as often because, I mean, why not just use the Lumix S5 for videos? But I'm definitely gonna give you guys some solid advice on continuing to use this camera. For example, the next video I'm dropping after this one is the best settings for shooting in low light with the Lumix G7. So be on the lookout for that video as soon as I drop this one, and you'll be able to get some solid advice. So to be honest about why I got the Lumix S5 over the Lumix G7, or why I upgraded to the Lumix S5 even though I had the Lumix G7, it's just for the pure fact of it just makes my video making, especially all the stuff that I'm gonna be doing in the future, just that much easier to get a cinematic vibe and a cinematic look, because I could do more in low light. I have a wider field of vision, and I can shoot with more stops of dynamic range on the Lumix S5. And to be honest with you, when I saw the type of quality that I can get out of the S5 compared to what my Blackmagic camera could do, it was either on par or maybe even a little bit better, because I also get autofocus with this camera, which is something that I've really been wanting my Blackmagic to be able to do, but it just doesn't. So honestly, I guess what I'm saying is if I was to take the Lumix G7 and put it together with my Blackmagic 4K camera, if they could have a baby, it would be the Lumix S5. And honestly, I'm loving the camera. So I just wanted to give you guys a reason why I upgraded. It doesn't mean that you guys have to upgrade. The Lumix S5 is a little pricey, but for that price point, you definitely get a lot of bang for your buck, and it's worth it if you're ready for the upgrade. Me, I had been using the Lumix G7 for a little under 2 years. I had been doing a lot of work with different record labels, and I'm just now realizing if I had the Lumix S5 during that time, it just would have made my workflow way easier. But anyways, with that said, if you guys have any questions, please leave them down below in the comment section. I really do look forward to seeing what you guys have to say, and I try to respond to them as soon as possible. This channel still is my favorite channel. Talking about cameras and stuff like that is something I could do all day, and I do plan on putting a lot more effort into helping this channel grow. But anyway, with that said, I'll see you guys in the next video. I'll be talking about the best settings to put the Lumix G7 at in order to get the best low light performance. See you guys in the next video. Peace.